A pleasant good morning, my brothers and sisters of Trinidad and Tobago and members of the United National Congress, members of the media, and to those of you who are logged on through the respective social media platforms. I want to welcome you all to another of our Sunday morning press conferences on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and Political Leader of the United National Congress, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar. This morning, myself and my parliamentary colleague, who also serves as my Member of Parliament, Mr. Dinesh Rambally, the Member of Parliament for Chaguanas West, will seek to dissect the issues which are continuing to plague the citizens of our beloved country under the broad theme of the PNM government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley continues to disrespect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And before I hand over to MP Rambally, I want to take the opportunity on behalf of our political leader, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and the National Executive of the UNC to express our sincere appreciation, thanks, and congratulations to all members of our party, councillors, MPs, senators, and all well-wishers who attended our Appreciation Day, Family and Fun Day at the Fun Splash Water Park in DB. It was really heartwarming to see the friendship, the camaraderie, the bonding and unity in relation to all involvement in the corridor, the exotic chow, choka, and all fours competition. And again, the UNC continues to recognize the exploits and achievements and feats of our sportsmen and sportswomen. And we continue to offer our congratulations to Nicholas Paul, Kwesi Brown, Zion Polido, and Tenil Campbell, who continue to fly the red, white, and black at the Pan Am Elite Championship Games, where they have secured medals on behalf of our country and brought glory to all of our citizens. So, without further ado, I would now hand over to MP Rambally.
Thank you, Member of Parliament for Couva South, MP Rudy Indarsingh. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, Senior Counsel, I welcome you, and it is my pleasure, of course, to join you by way of this traditional opposition Sunday morning press conference. Today, I would like to discuss the critical issue of crime, and in particular, human trafficking. Sometimes, in order to better understand our current problems, we need only study our history and view our current predicament through the lens of the past. Today, I want to share with you a real story from our history of the torture of a young girl called Louisa Calderon. Louisa Calderon was a 14-year-old Trinidadian girl born to a Venezuelan migrant. She was a servant of a wealthy businessman known as Ruiz, who also took her as his mistress with promises of marriage. Louisa was suspected of stealing money from Ruiz. Under orders from then Governor Picton, after whom our own street in Port of Spain was named, Louisa was tortured in a style known as picketing. And picketing was where the victim, and I know that we have the screen and the slides behind us, picketing was where the victim has one arm tied by a restraint that runs through a pulley connected to the ceiling, while the other arm is tied tightly to one of the feet so that the leg is forcibly bent upward at the knee. The remaining foot is then positioned so that a toe rests on a spiked piece of wood as the weight of the whole body is lowered onto it. An excerpt of the account can be found in a book called The Last Caribbean Frontier, 1795 to 1815. This method of torture later became later came to be called pictoning. Governor Picton was subsequently tried by the British authorities for this torture. You might be wondering why I chose to relate this story. Well, when I initially came upon it, I was struck by the similarities between that story, which occurred centuries ago, and what happens in our country today. Like Louisa's mother, Venezuelan migrants come here, many in desperate search for a better life. They make life compromises just to survive. Like Louisa, many young girls have their fate decided for them and are given over to men who wield power or are trafficked by people who are often well connected to high government officials. Louisa's particular torture was severe, but not necessarily more than the many displaced and many orphaned children who have been put in the now notorious children's homes. This torture of Louisa happened a little over 200 years ago, at a time when brutality was the norm and Trinidad was a colony. Today, Trinidad is no longer a colony, but the brutality of centuries ago continue to shackle our national conscience. To put it another way, sometimes the more things change, the more they stay the same. Indeed, because of the inaction of this PNM government, this Rowley-led PNM government, there is no hope for improvement, as they have demonstrated their exceptional ability to yap endlessly while people suffer. What happened to Louisa many years ago continue to happen to our women folk on a daily basis in Trinidad and Tobago today. Women are tortured and abused, bludgeoned to death. They are trafficked and sold as sex slaves. Child trafficking and other horrific forms of child abuse are happening in this country because of the power of certain people who are well connected to the upper echelons of power, just like Ruiz was. But Picton was called to account in the courts. Everybody recognizes when enough is enough. Well, everybody except this Rowley-led PNM government. Despite the stunning advances in technology for crime detection and prevention, technology to empower the national apparatus to intercept criminals, and a whole lot of legislative rights that ought to protect us from barbarism, it is as if we are still living under the Picton regime, because this Rowley-led PNM government has utterly failed to move us into a safer space and time. They have no strategy, no plan, and no political will to address the deepest disturbance facing our country, that is crime. A casual glance at the headlines give us a snapshot of a nation under siege and unable to receive any protections from the state. And I just want to refer to the slides that we are showing on the screen now. You will see some of these. This is Loop News, Loop Crime News. Police autopsy shows Karine Ramlal died of blunt force trauma. This is the Trinidad Guardian. Venezuelan woman 22 robbed, raped in the heights of a repo, and this would have been after the Andrea Barrett disaster or demise. Daily Express, Barrackpore woman assaulted at home. 3 held for robbing teacher outside bank. Princestown woman robbed in home invasion. Girl 15 missing, Trinidad Guardian. Doctors, cops in social media groups sharing child images, porn videos. Newsday, woman 82 shot, chopped. Venezuelan authorities, Newsday again, arrest 4 people for sex trafficking to Trinidad and Tobago. So this is to give you a snapshot of a nation, our nation, under siege. In Trinidad and Tobago today, our women and children are hunted and preyed upon by criminals with apparent impunity. The Commissioner of Police should not hide behind the label of gender violence as if it is not his business. A crime is a crime. It is no less bloody and painful because a woman is hacked to death by her husband or a lover. A crime is a crime. She bleeds all the same. She is tortured all the same. Louisa's torture did not diminish because it stemmed from someone she knew closely. Far from. It was torture all the same. The Prime Minister, Dr. Rowley, may have got one thing right when he declared that crime is a public health emergency. But having so declared, what next, Mr. Prime Minister? What has he or his government done to protect us all, especially the women and children, from being besieged by violent crime on a daily basis? Absolutely nothing. This government gets a kick out of talking endlessly. They become quite involved in spinning a story to defend the indefensible. Like, how could you say the AG did nothing wrong, though he lied on oath before a court of law? Yet, the Prime Minister has spoken, defending the indefensible, and we as people, as the citizenry, we are supposed to shut up. But that's not happening. Imagine, after receiving a failing grade from the US Department of State for our obvious lack of progress in bringing this aberration of human trafficking to a halt, Minister of National Insecurity, Minister Hines, in commemorating the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, tried to counter the report and deflect blame for his failure by saying that we Trinis and the Americans understand the meaning of the word prosecuted differently. This is a government that loves to play with words. That's all they can do. Talk and no action. This report issued by the US Department of State was damning. According to it, the Trinidad and Tobago government has 1. Failed to demonstrate overall increasing efforts compared to the previous reporting period. 2. Failed to convict a trafficker under its 2011 anti-trafficking law. 3. The PNM government has failed to address corruption and official complicity in trafficking crimes. 4. This PNM government failed to take action against senior government officials alleged in 2020 to be involved in human trafficking. 5. Failed to formally adopt the National Action Plan for 2021 to 2023. This PNM government failed to sufficiently fund, provide staffing resources and expertise to the counter-trafficking unit. This PNM government failed to treat with reports of police officers, Coast Guard officials, and immigration and customs officers who facilitated the trafficking trade. 8. It failed to establish a standardized program and or implement a formalized protocol for victim care. 9. Failed to provide sufficient funding and personnel for comprehensive victim care, including appropriate shelters with adequate staff and security personnel. 10. Failed to provide funding for or manage any trafficking specific shelters. 11. Failed to protect TNT's borders during the pandemic despite closing the borders in March 2020, resulting in more victims arriving by sea and being shuttled to private and clandestine locations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a UNC report. It is not a report authored by Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisessa. It is not Rambally or MP Indarsingh saying so. This is an official report from the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, we recently concluded our Emancipation Day celebrations. Yet, we have modern day slavery of women, children, and Venezuelans right under our noses. They are suffering as we speak. They and our missing children are waiting to be rescued. Families are waiting for the return of their missing children, or at least some form of closure. Unfortunately, with each moment that passes in hope that we see some action by this government, some child out there, some mother, some woman continues to be trafficked against her will, not sure if there is going to be a tomorrow. Despite this Rowley-led PNM's government's well-publicized failure to engage, people continue to wait for a miracle in the face of an absolute lack of political will to as much as dry up the tears of those victims. But that is not all. We have the children's home scandals that has rocked this nation to its core. Only very recently, we had the roles reversed and the victim was a caregiver. Under this government, this society has become rife with anger and criminality. There is deep discord and despair. There is the great declaration that the crime is a public health emergency. But how, pray tell, does that help my sisters to walk the road safely? How does it help my brothers, the doublesman, the pensioners, the taxi drivers to keep the faith and believe that things will turn around? How? People have put themselves into self-imposed curfews, fearing for their own safety. And even when they are locked into their houses, they are still not safe, as the bandits seem to be ahead of their game, while this Rowley-led PNM government plays catch-up. Ladies and gentlemen, I can no longer find it decent to eat my dinner while watching the news. How can you feel happy about sipping coffee while you view the horror that strikes at our people on a daily basis and without fail? News of crime makes our stomach churn. I and the loyal opposition put this failure to deal with crime seriously squarely on the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, as head of the cabinet and in his capacity as head of the National Security Council, and also Minister Hines, who continues to fail to even convince us that he knows how to handle crime. Let's not forget that he is on record as saying that it is not his duty to ensure people feel safe and secure. I know what you're thinking. What the hell, right? He, Minister Hines, further stated that his duty is to lend encouragement and general support to the various national security agencies. Support and encouragement means talk, and more talk. Call it logorrhea, verbal diarrhea, or whatever you want. The fact is that after all is said and done, more is said than done. This Rowley-led PNM government has utterly failed to address crime. Don't take my word for it. Check the US State Department report yourself. They, and I'm referring to the government, they have failed to ensure people's safety. They have failed to ensure people's security. And they are on record as declaring that such is not their business. Ladies and gentlemen, I call on this Rowley-led PNM government to explain why, under their watch, people continue to be suffering so brutally at the hands of criminals. I want to close by remembering the words of Lord Sumption, one of the greatest law lords. And this is what he said: if you simply reject the past without trying to understand it, we are unlikely to learn from it. Ladies and gentlemen, right now, there is a call to rename Picton Street, not far from where we are having this press conference. However, if we continue to fail to learn from the horrendous acts committed by Governor Picton, then these atrocities will continue just under new names. Could you imagine that the government has rushed to set up a committee to possibly rename Picton Street, yet there has been no indication to address the crimes of the kind that Picton himself committed? We're really moving backwards in this country under this Rowley PNM-led government. Backwards. We have a damning report on the extent of human trafficking in this country, yet there has been no substantive action taken by the Rowley-led government to address the concerns raised by the US. So it leaves me, MP Indarsingh, and members of the media, citizens, all, that maybe we should consider renaming Picton Street to Hines Street. If the government has no interest in dealing with human trafficking and crimes against women and children, may I suggest that the government rename Picton Street to Hines Street? I assure you that would be going down the same road all the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Rambally, for raising the very important issue of human trafficking and the dangers that it continues to pose to the women of Trinidad and Tobago, and the inaction of this government in bringing any sense of relief and comfort to the women of our country over the last 7 years. And this morning, I will demonstrate on behalf of the United National Congress the continued contempt of the Prime Minister and members of his cabinet in terms of their behavioral pattern and their contempt and arrogance towards the tax-paying citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And members of the media, Trinidad and Tobago, you may want to ask why this focus here this morning, or this line of focus. But I want to take the opportunity to remind you all that the Prime Minister has been leading the ministers of his cabinet with his rogue, contemptuous, arrogant, and lawless behavior in terms of how they govern Trinidad and Tobago. And I say this from the point of view that the Prime Minister recently went to the Summit of the Americas meeting in the United States of America. And he overstayed his time out there for approximately 1 month. The Prime Minister was missing in action. We have up till now really not been told what were the real reasons for his prolonged absence from Trinidad and Tobago. I think he set a national record in terms of being the Prime Minister, a sitting Prime Minister, who stayed out of this country for for probably the longest period without providing the country with a plausible explanation. And at taxpayers' expense, we do not know the cost of his stay. We did not know the composition of his delegation. And as I said, what was the cost to the taxpayers of this country. So he has set the example where they sneak in and out of the country. Like if they are on private business, they are traveling in and out of Trinidad and Tobago with their private monies. And we have seen ministers come and go, and we are not told via a press release or some official explanation why a cabinet minister has left the country, the composition of his or her delegation, and for the purpose of leaving Trinidad and Tobago. And this has been clearly demonstrated when pictures emerged in recent times where we saw the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young, meeting with the president of the, as they like to term it, the Bolivarian Republic of Trinidad of Venezuela, in President Maduro. And this morning, the gentleman in the picture in the background, closest to President Maduro, the United National Congress will attempt to raise some very pertinent issues. And we hope that the Prime Minister, because at the end of the day, Minister Young did not leave Trinidad and Tobago on his own accord. He would have had to have the blessings an official sanction of the Prime Minister to land in Venezuela. And as I said, last week we saw where the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs, Stuart Young, visit President Maduro in Venezuela. And this morning, the opposition, the United National Congress, we are seeking answers where we are calling upon the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, who has again gone missing. We do not know of his whereabouts. In fact, we do not know if he is very fearful of the branches around him in terms of those individuals who are guarding him and so on. And in that regard, we want to know why his prolonged absence again from governing Trinidad and Tobago, and we want him and his Minister of Energy to tell the population what business was so urgent that it warranted this nation's international reputation being further tarnished and the possible risk of sanctions being imposed on this country because of this meeting between. We are demanding that Minister Young confirm if the gentleman standing next to President Maduro, if he can confirm for us if indeed he is one Tariq al-Assami, who is sanctioned in the United States and a known drug trafficker was in that room, and why would he subject himself to such a meeting? And in fact, both individuals, because I am in possession and we are in possession, when I say I am, the UNC is in possession of a number of documents that have been written by the Reuters news agency and Associated Press, the Associated Press. And I also want to read from documents that are official documents of the US State Department, which focuses on President Nicolas Maduro and also one Tariq al-Assami in terms of where they are in the international community. And the documents are dated the 26th of March 2020, and it is under the headline Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. And it goes on to read that one Nicolas Maduro helped manage and ultimately lead the cartel of this violent narco-terrorism conspiracy with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, a designated foreign terrorist organization. Maduro negotiated multi-ton shipment of FARC-produced cocaine, directed the cartel of the Suns to provide military-grade weapons to the FARC, and during his tenure as foreign minister, coordinated foreign affairs with Honduras and other countries to facilitate large-scale drug armed forces unit for the cartel of the Sun. And he is also, the United States, he's also the subject of a U.S. Department of State reward where there's a bounty for $15 million on his head, leading to his arrest or conviction. And the gentleman al-Assami, he too, and I just want to read from a similar document. Al-Assami facilitated shipments of narcotics from Venezuela to include control over planes that left from a Venezuelan airbase and drug routes through the ports in Venezuela. In his previous positions, he oversaw or partially owned narcotic shipments of more than 1,000 kilograms from Venezuela on multiple occasions, including those with the final destination of Mexico and the United States. He too has been indicted on the 1st of March 2019. A federal grand jury sitting in the Southern District of New York returned an indictment charging El-Assami with violating U.S. sanctions in connection with his use of private aircraft, including on the 23rd of February 2019 return flight offering of a reward of up to $10 million for information leading to the arrest or the conviction of El-Assami. And the documents continue to reveal that this goodly gentleman has been indicted by or sanctioned by several countries. And in fact, he was sanctioned by Canada on the 22nd of September 2017, and the European Union sanctioned him on the 25th of June 2018 with his assets frozen and being banned from travel. And also, the Switzerland sanctioned him on the 10th of July 2018, freezing his assets, imposing a travel ban, while citing the same reason for the European Union. So this morning, we will continue to ask the Prime Minister and his Minister of Energy why they continue to demonstrate no shame. They have no sense of duty and responsibility to this nation, because this government, over the last 7 years, they have single-handedly destroyed the energy sector, crippled the economy, and now, if that wasn't bad enough, they want to rub salt in the wounds of our citizens by risking us with sanctions. Minister Young, we have to tell the country that in fact, your meeting with Minister El-Assami was not a mistake. And I want members of the media and the country to listen to my parliamentary colleague very carefully, Dr. Rudal Munilal, the Member of Parliament for Arapooch East, when he posed questions to the Prime Minister on Vice President Delcy's visit to Trinidad and Tobago. And I want you to listen to this clip very carefully.
Was the government of Trinidad and Tobago concerned that the government had accepted at that time a visit by the Vice President of Venezuela 24 hours after colleagues, officials, including the President of Venezuela, were indicted in the United States on drug trafficking, narco trafficking, and corruption charges? No, we have no concern with that.
Having listened to the words of our Prime Minister, you have to understand why we have reached this all-time low in terms of our governance and how we approach the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Total disrespect, contempt, and arrogance. Here you have my parliamentary colleague 2 years ago posing a question to the Prime Minister of whether he was concerned or did he have prior information about how our government saw the indictment of President Maduro and other high-ranking officials in the context of our ongoing relationship between the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Venezuela, and our Prime Minister, the citizens of our country, that it did not concern him. So the Prime Minister does not care, or he does not see, he and his Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs and the entire cabinet does not see any risk towards its relationship with the United States arising out of Minister Young meeting with State Department as being heavily involved in the drug trade. That is your Prime Minister. That is the conduct of the ministers of government that we have. Because you see, Trinidad and Tobago, we have to understand what is continuing to unravel under this government, because we believe that instead of going to Venezuela, Minister Young should be clearing up the lies that he told CNN when he said that Trinidad and Tobago was ramping up oil and gas production, when that was clearly an untruth, as oil and gas production continues to fall. Instead of going to Venezuela, Minister Young should be apologizing to the population for betraying them and causing them to lose billions when oil prices are sky high. But Trinidad and Tobago cannot benefit because our production levels are dirt low. And instead of going to Venezuela, Minister Young should be apologizing to the country for making the energy sector a ghost town as investment continues to collapse. And we reject towards Venezuela is changing. That is figboat diplomacy by the PNM. The US policy has not shifted enough for a major beneficiary of US services, and for once a major ally of the US, like TNT, to be meeting Maduro, as well as known drug traffickers who are running afoul of the law. It sends a very clear message that indeed the Prime Minister and his cabinet, because what is the purpose of going there unless you are in a similar business, or you are involved in similar business dealings, shady dealings and so on, that you go, you have a meeting with the president of Venezuela and other senior officials, and you cannot come and account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago how or what were the benefits of the meeting, what was the agenda of the meeting, what was the purpose of the meeting, and why taxpayers' monies are being expended in Venezuela with no accountability, no proper governance. These are the answers that we will continue to seek on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, because it is this same government that closed Petrotrin. It is this same government that put the lives of 9,000 plus persons on the line and destroyed the stability of 9,000 families in the energy sector, and all those companies and service companies that were indirectly linked to the operations of Petrotrin. And this morning, my brothers and sisters, we must realize that the government improvement in your standard of living and quality of life under this visionless, incompetent, corrupt, arrogant, and contemptuous government. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago has regressed over the last 7 years. We as a people, we as a society, and the workers and labor movement must never forget what they promised you in their manifesto of 2020. Yes, Rowley and the PNM promised you a productive sector. They promised you restoring growth, diversity, and confidence to the economy. They promised you macroeconomic stability, strong institutions, and investor confidence, sustainable growth and diversification, and to promote job creation and social justice in the context of meeting and treating with issues that are affecting the workers of this country who in 2022 are existing on 2012 salaries. And that is why I would continue, or the United National Congress, and I in the capacity as the shadow with responsibility for labor affairs, will continue to be on the side of the workers in Trinidad and Tobago. We will continue to offer our solidarity because we continue to see that the labor movement is sending a very clear signal to the government of Trinidad and Tobago that the time for Rowley and his government to go. And that is why you see that the headlines featured shakedown time, trade unions vow to rest and reflect against the 4% wage offer. And they took to the streets in their thousands last Friday. And the UNC is saying that the government's offer to public servants of 4%, they move from 2 to 4, is reprehensible. In fact, the Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance has hijacked the free and fair collective bargaining process. This government's cents are expanding across the country. Profits are being made by some, but are not trickling down to the working class. Under Rowleynomics, conglomerates are benefiting, but the poor man pays for the benefit of the 1%. And we are currently in the 8th year of the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, and it is unacceptable, unfathomable, and disheartening that after 7 years in government, the Prime Minister and his cabinet can offer only a 4% wage increase against the background of food escalation in food prices, the removal of the fuel subsidy. In fact, they twice, he raised it 3 times, and he will continue to raise it because the citizens of our country have not rioted. And in that regard, my brothers and sisters, we in the UNC call upon the labor movement and the workers of Trinidad and Tobago to continue their unity in sending a very clear message to the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, because the struggle must not end or just revolve around this 4% wage offer. We must remember, and I want to remind the Prime Minister and remind the Minister of Finance and his cabinet to tell us, because in the budget presentation for 2020, the budget presentation for 2020, the Minister of Finance, when he presented the budget on the 7th of October 2019, he said under the broad heading of daily paid public servants, Madam Speaker, presently when a daily paid worker in the public service retires, a lump sum of money is received, but no pension. And this burning issue has been discussed and ad infinitum by successive governments, and the PNM governments intend to solve this long-standing problem once and for all. And in order to provide economic relief and to offset the daily expenses of the retired daily paid public workers going forward, I now propose that daily paid workers in the public service with an appropriate minimum length of service be eligible for a minimum public service pension of $3,500. This will be a contributory pension plan similar to the contributory health plan already in the public sector, already in force for the public sector, Further details of this measure will be given in the Finance Act in 2019, and the new pension plan for daily paid workers will take effect in 2020. We are in 2022, and in the context of the collective bargaining process, not a word, not a line, not a sound from the Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance as it relates to this daily paid contributory pension plan, where it is, and also where the government is with public service pension reform. Because in this same budget presentation, the Prime Minister said public service pension, I propose, Madam Speaker, I propose to review public service pensions with a view to indexing these pensions at an appropriate level. This review will be completed in fiscal 2020. So the shakedown, the message must not only be on the collective bargaining process, it must be on the contributory pension plan for daily paid workers. It must be on public service pension reform. The government must state whether they have lifted the ban on hiring persons in the public service, how they are filling vacancies within very important institutions such as the Occupational Safety and Health Authority, and whether the government is lifting the ban that it has imposed on the hiring of new teachers in the teaching service. There are thousands of young people who are coming out of the school system, the education system on an annual basis, and this government has taken the unilateral decision that there's also a freeze in the hiring of new teachers and the filling of vacancies in the teaching service. So we are saying in the United National Congress here this morning that the trade union movement, the labor movement, the workers of Trinidad and Tobago must not let up the pressure on this government, because outside of the collective bargaining process, there are numerous issues that needs to be hammered out by this government, who continues to operate with words and with words and inaction, and therefore we see it as gross disrespect, continued arrogance and contempt for the people of this country who deserve better with the billions of dollars that continue to be spent by this government on an annual basis in terms of their budgetary allocation. And this is why we believe that they continue to betray, deceive, lie, and they have declared war on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We thank you for listening to us here this morning, and on behalf of myself and MP Rambally, we will now take questions from members of the media.
Right, so I'll start with MP Rambally. To give us a detailed presentation on what the government has not done to address the issue of human trafficking. But what are some of the solutions that UNC would propose?
Well, it is very simple. You must have the political will to start with. So what this government is lacking, and that is what I have spent the time in my presentation this morning, this government lacks political will to deal with crime. One must ask the question, why is that so? Why is the government not interested in going after those reports of having high-ranking officials somehow complicit with the commission of these human trafficking crimes? Why are you not carrying out detailed investigations into immigration, into customs, into police service, where you have domestic reports as well as that of the U.S. State Department, which points towards these officials being complicit with the commission of human trafficking? We all know, if you ask the UNC to produce statistics, that may be something we may not have immediately available, but everybody knows that when you have trafficking rampant, like what we are seeing now in the Western Hemisphere, alongside with trafficking, you have drugs being shipped from country to country. You have ammunition, guns, illicit ammunition. So all of these things, what would the UNC do? The UNC would take a step, first of all, having the political will to deal with it. It will then take the immediate steps in getting down into the trenches Number one, in the police service, there must be a department which will be established that will look clearly into the officers, ascertaining who those rogue officers are. You have to expend resources in these matters of going after those rogue elements. In other words, you cannot have, and that is the whole, theme of the account today. If you have to learn from history, you cannot always be reactive after the fact. So we can't come every time when there is the commission of a crime, or we have a report saying that we are not dealing with a crime, to say, well, okay, and hope that it will get better one day. You have to spend the resources. You have to prioritize budgeting within the Ministry of National Security to weed out those rogue elements. So that is a matter which you will have to treat with. That is one of the foremost steps to be taken, because these are the agencies itself that are chartered with investigating the commission of these types of offenses. So you can't say that you want to deal with trafficking, but the officials, the law enforcement side, or the law enforcement agents who are to deal with those things, they themselves are complicit in it. So you have to weed out that, number one. And there are other steps. The U.S. State Department in its report has also pointed to some of the steps which we have to take, And one of the things that I can tell you that, it is something, it is really a stark difference between the PNM and this UNC. What you have is the PNM saying, imagine you have a minister of security, national security, coming and saying, the reason why the U.S. State Department has made those findings is because there is a difference in interpretation of the word prosecute. I mean, what nonsense is that? So you must first admit, you must be willing to concede that there is a problem so that you can then tackle it. But that is not the modus operandi of the PNM government. Their modus operandi is simply to spin some words, to yap endlessly, and to deflect, duck and run. So this is what has to be done. You have to face the problems. I mean, we could go into some more details as to what we intend to do, but I would say you must have the political will. You must be prepared to invest the resources within Ministry of National Security to weed out those elements, because those are the elements that are perpetuating the crimes that we are talking about. And you must be willing to concede that you have this problem on such an international scale, filtering through our shores, our borders, and be prepared to deal with it.
Okay, and on another topic, did you receive any word from the states about your concerns about the riverbank in Carney?
That is a very important question. I know it is off topic. Coincidentally, MP Indarsingh is my constituent in Chaguanas West. He lives in the Carney area. We have not had any word. Again, this is one of the problems with this PNM-led government, this Rowley PNM-led government. They are so reactive. They are never looking at finding solutions. You take the riverbanks, you have neglected the drainage, the infrastructure, you have neglected river infrastructure for the last 7 years. And now you will have the Minister of Works coming today in 2022 to say, well, we don't have money to deal with those things. Had you been proactive and dealing with the issues on a continuing basis over the last 7 years, it would not have piled up and rotted into such a situation, disaster, that it is fast becoming now. So my short answer to you is no. The long answer is that I hope and I expect that good sense will prevail. Residents of Ibis Gardens, Lapai Gardens, Caroni Village, Lapai Settlement, these peoples are at risk of experiencing a disaster which will be tantamount to or will surpass what we saw in what we typically call the Greenvale experience in 2018. I hope that the authorities will act. I have written a detailed letter. MP Indarsingh and myself, we would have consulted most of the Caroni residents when we had this last flooding about a week and a half ago. And having consulted them, that is where that document was compiled. I had the advice of MP Indarsingh as well when I compiled that document. We have put forward short-term measures and long-term measures, and I hope that they will act on it.
Okay, so you, MP Indarsingh.
Yes.
My list of questions here. Just a question. So, per se, what proof do you ask Minister Young to confirm whether or not El Asami was the person you photo? But then you then went on to speak about him definitively being the person in the room. You know, what proof do you have that he was the person in the photo?
Well, the photo speaks for itself in terms of the documents that I have before me, in terms of documents from the U.S. State Department. And if I hold up this, and that is why I am asking Minister Young and the Prime Minister to come clean, because they have a consistent track record. And if they are flying in and out of Venezuela with taxpayers' monies, they need to account to the people of Trinidad and Tobago at the end of the day, because it is not. And first and foremost, in 2020, when my parliamentary colleague raised the issue in the House, the Prime Minister displayed no sense of care and duty to the country. And this is not the private money they're traveling in and out of this country with. So we need to know the agenda, the purpose of the meeting, the composition of the delegation, and what it costs the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago. This kind of lack of accountability and transparency and good governance cannot continue under the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. And this is why we are raising this issue. It was not a mistake. It is not a mistake because it was also reported in the Trinidad Guardian when these photographs was leaked that indeed it was El Asami who was in this meeting.
Because you said the photos were leaked, but I remember seeing them on the page of the National Security of Energy and Energy Industries.
Well, probably it was damage control after he realized in an effort to save his face and his government's face in the context of meeting with rogue elements in the international global community that they did damage control.
Because I also was reading a Washington Post article that said earlier this year U.S. officials actually flew to Venezuela to meet with Maduro to talk about, getting oil from them, considering the situation with Russia currently. So is it that since the U.S. has been doing that we can now have these things as well, or?
I am saying, and the United Nations Congress is saying, that in the context of diplomacy, the U.S. policy has not shifted in terms of what I term to be, they cannot come and try and spin in the context of fig boat diplomacy and so on. And we are holding our government to account in relation to whether they have considered the risks of or the fallout in terms of sanctions being imposed on Trinidad and Tobago. That is all we are saying, and we are asking what was the agenda of the meeting. Tell the taxpayers of the country so that we can be comforted that it was in the interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. This was not a secret discussion. Minister Young was not on vacation leave. Was he on vacation leave? No, that is the question that has to be answered. If he was on vacation leave and he went there on private business and so on, well, then we could pull back. But as an opposition, we will seek the answers and clarification on behalf of the taxpayers of this country. This sneaking in and out of Trinidad and Tobago on travel, not being told via official releases, the purpose, as I said, the composition of your delegations and so on. These are the things that we must continue to ask and seek the questions on. And the government of Prime Minister Dr. Rowley, at the end of the day, we believe is he courting sanctions being imposed on this country because of their continued behavior? Because, as I said, since 2020, he made it very clear in the parliament that this was of no concern to him.
Because, I just did a Google search and they did actually send out, and I remember that Minister Young sent out a release saying that he was going to Caracas, and then when he came back, he said who he met with and some of the matters that were discussed, although no details were given on the discussion. My next question, and also you mentioned that we didn't know why the Prime Minister was out of the country and absent, but we knew that in the first instance he was doing medical tests, and in the second instance he had COVID, so I'm not.
No, I think when
I made that point about the Prime Minister, he went to the Summit of the Americas. We were told that that was the purpose of his official travel. And then it was extended and it kept growing in terms of the days. And at that point in time, the opposition continued to seek information about the whereabouts of the Prime Minister. And it is based on our consistent position, then they were forced in providing information. Up till today, we really do not know, as the taxpayers of this country, the real reason for the extended stay. We were told that it was a medical condition. If it was a medical condition, we understand. But I think we too need to know the composition of the delegation and what it caused the taxpayers of this country. As I said earlier on, I think the Prime Minister set a national record in terms of his stay out of Trinidad and Tobago. No other Prime Minister in political history I could recollect stayed out for such an extended period, and he has even returned to the country. We were told, and you see, the lies continue to come from this government. Because you said that we were told that the Prime Minister had COVID when I spoke about his continued absence and so on. Recently, you had a minister, they called a meeting with the local government councillors in the country. The Minister of Local Government said that the Prime Minister did not turn up to the local government meeting because of the UNC boycott to that meeting. And then on the official page of the Prime Minister, the Facebook page, it stated that the Prime Minister could not come to that meeting because he was in quarantine as a result of having contracted COVID. The inconsistency, the lies, who to believe? Believe the Prime Minister official page or believe Minister Al-Rawi? That is why we continue to say you cannot trust this government in terms of how they are governing Trinidad and Tobago. It is disrespect, it is lies, it is deceit, it is contempt, it is arrogance, it is visionless leadership, it is incompetent leadership. And we could go on and on here this morning.
I wanted to ask, I do have a question about that local government meeting, but just to finish up this set of questioning, I was wondering if the UNC was in power now, would it recognize Maduro as president of Venezuela? Who do you recognize as president of Venezuela? And would you be in talks with them?
Those issues are something that we will have to continue to have an official position if we were in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. At the end of the day, the leader of the opposition has continued to pronounce the party's position on the state of affairs between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. We recognize that Venezuela is part of the global community, and we, if we would have been in government, would have exercised a sense of responsibility in terms of how we conducted affairs with Venezuela in the context of the issues that would have presented itself to us.
And speaking of the local government, which is now coming back to home ground, has anyone from the leadership of the party reached out to the MP who, not the MP, the councillor, who attended the meeting?
Well, the leader of the opposition has made it very clear that in the context of that issue, it was really a non-issue. Councillor Sanka stated that he was not informed of the memo and so on. The leader of the opposition has said that he's free to conduct himself in relation to his responsibilities and so on. But I think the most important thing too that should have been focused on, it was advertised that the Prime Minister was supposed to address that meeting of local government councillors. Why did he not turn up to address that meeting? That is the issue too that should be focused on.
I think if MP Indarsingh permits me, in response to one of your earlier questions, the issue is not whether the UNC will take a position as to whether we now respect sovereignty through Juan Guaido or Maduro. The issue that the population is concerned with is the fact that it is clear that this Rowley-led PNM government is definitely respecting Maduro and the Maduro regime, and it is against that backdrop the questions that must be answered is what are all these meetings that MP Indarsingh has pointed to, where you have our own officials going to Venezuela and vice versa. They had come here during the pandemic, and the honorable leader of the opposition herself has asked a question which has to be answered squarely by the government, and that is whether or not the Rowley-led government, are they courting sanctions by their behavior? And that is the real issue that has been asked by the leader of the opposition herself. So I want to take it back to that issue, and we must understand that that is really what the nation is crying for in terms of transparency.
And my final question is, when can we expect to see the opposition leader at one of these conferences?
Well, I think it is not a matter of when we expect the leader of the opposition. Once there is an issue which is in the national interest, and it is something that you will see the leader of the opposition will either ask the shadow minister of a particular portfolio to deal with it, and she herself will come out in defense of the people, in the interest of the people and in defense of the people. When we had the total collapse of a police service commission for months, and we have and continue to have no substantive police commissioner, the leader of the opposition was here in this same office holding a press conference. The leader of the opposition held a press conference in the parliament. The leader of the opposition held the necessary, I would say, citizen conference by way of Monday Night Forum. I mean, those are questions. I don't think that really is a question which, if it is trying to decipher that the leader of the opposition is not here on a Sunday morning. The party is structured. I mean, MP Indarsingh has more experience than me, obviously, that you will have different persons going at different times and the resources are extended. But the simple point I wanted to make, MP Indarsingh, and in response to that question, is that once there is an issue which is of sufficient and paramount importance to the interests of the citizenry, the leader of the opposition will not hesitate and has always shown by her own track record that she is out there, whether it is here in this office, whether it is in the parliament, and whether it is in the people's platform by way of the various opposition platforms we host Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, as the case may be.
The leader of the opposition has always availed herself to members of the media. Only Friday she was out in the Fun Splash and DB in the UNC engagement, and she availed herself to the media. She answered questions from members of the media. So, and the way she has continued to develop members of parliament and councillors and so on, as MP Rambally has said, this is where issues that are affecting the people of this country from a line ministry's point of view, she will assign shadow members with the respective portfolios to be at these press conferences, and at the end of the day, the members of the UNC, whether it is the leader of the opposition or members of parliament or national executive, they continue to avail themselves to members of the media in terms of whatever questions may be posed.
Other question coming in, Senor.
Yes.
There are two major energy issues between Trinidad and Venezuela. One is the Dragon gas deal, and the other one is the Rambally cross-border deal. Neither of those initiatives appear to be getting off the ground anytime soon. So, therefore, what do you think, in your opinion, the Minister Young meets with members of the Venezuelan energy matters?
And that is, I would hope that the head of these multinational corporations and the energy chambers and so on will be adding their voice to get from Minister Young and the Prime Minister what was really discussed in this meeting. Because we remember about how many years ago the Prime Minister was in a conga line. He was leading a conga line and telling the country that the Dragon gas was coming to Trinidad and Tobago. Probably the Dragon Indarsingh or the Dragon can dance again. And also on the Lauren Manatee field, we have not heard from the government. And these were the two critical energy projects that they outlined very early in terms of their relationship with Venezuela. It has collapsed. We have not gotten any updates in recent times. And this is why we is saying, in the interest of accountability, what was discussed in these meetings. And that is why we need to know, because the energy sector has collapsed. And if indeed the discussions can lead to the revival of oil and gas production and so on in Trinidad and Tobago, well, they should come and tell the country, and the opposition will analyze the merits and demerits of what they have in the pipeline. So if we cannot hear what was the real agenda, then we may come to the conclusion that birds of a feather flock together in terms of shady dealings and what persons have been indicted for.
There is apparently a $15 million bounty on the whereabouts of Mr. Al-Assami by the U.S.
Well, okay, the documents I have in front of me will tell me that there's one of $15 million on Nicolas Maduro Moros and a $10 million bounty on Mr. Al-Assami.
Given that Minister Young is a former Minister of National Security, do you think that you should explain why he met with a person indicted for drug trafficking?
Well, we would expect that any law-abiding minister, any responsible minister would explain, as a former Minister of National Security in the context, as you rightly said, whoever posed that question, would be reporting to the country and accounting to. But he's probably taking the cue from his Prime Minister, who in 2020 in the House of Representatives said that it was of no concern to him. So if his Prime Minister has set the example, I expect no better in terms of transparency, accountability, and good governance.
I think any more questions?
Not really.
I just wanted to raise this point, and I know MP Indarsingh will conclude unless there are other questions. To members of the media, and this is generally, the members of the media, I mean, certainly we are grateful, and I know I echo the sentiments of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, my parliamentary colleagues, when we say that we truly appreciate the work of the media. But the media owes a duty to itself, and it owes a duty to the country not to be distracted. And that is something that is serious. Don't go chasing phantoms or phantom conspiracies. What you have in Trinidad and Tobago right now, even this morning between MP Indarsingh and myself, the issues that affect the Trinidad and Tobago people are glaring for all to see. Right now, what we have an absentee Prime Minister. We have heard today, every time he travels, yes, they may indicate at the outset, look, the Prime Minister is due to do X, Y, and Z, and there's an agenda or a purpose of it. But if you notice in recent times, more recent times, there is always an unaccounted period or prolonged period beyond the purpose for which he has traveled. That is what MP Indarsingh was talking about. We had a massive storm. Thankfully, it did not hit Trinidad and Tobago. But we had a massive storm coming here, and everybody was like, where is the Prime Minister? Why is he not back yet? And we had one minister, the Minister of Local Government says, the Prime Minister sent a message, don't panic. And we laughed. We said, well, that message that the Prime Minister said, don't panic, it had to be that he was sending that directly to Al-Rawi. Minister Al-Rawi, you don't panic, right? But, you know, if you all recall, these are the serious matters that we have to deal with. Unaccounted periods of prolonged delay. The Prime Minister, I don't know if you all are aware of this, you know. He is due, MP Indarsingh, the Prime Minister himself is due to be installed in the Guinness Book of World Records, you know, as being a nation's leader who contracted COVID the most amount of times. He is going to go down in the Guinness Book of World Records as having to be quarantined at least 3 times. So I don't know for all these periods of time. And when you look at even the Prime Minister's Facebook page and what they issue, there are always inconsistencies as to what is taking place with the Prime Minister. His cabinet is going to go down in the Guinness Book of World Records, you know, for what? For having the most amount of recusals. And we're not talking about 5 and 6, you know. We are not talking about double digits, you know. We are talking about triple digits figures as to how many times people in that cabinet has had to recuse themselves over the years. So these are the real issues that people want to really get some accountability on. You have the most amount of recusals. Today we have spoken about crime. Crime, could we just show some of the more recent highlights on crime? Economy, the economy even pre-pandemic was taking a nosedive. You have heard it today from MP Indarsingh. But they are somehow happy and expecting some kind of windfall because of a war which has now emerged between Russia and Ukraine. They are holding on to that. That is the kind of governance we have. So look at this. Look at this. This is really contemporaneous. You have Charleville man killed at workplace. One of my own constituents. Before I say anything further, my condolences to the family and their constituents on Chaguanas West. Father witnesses son's murder. Just look, a picture paints more than 1,000 words here. Suspect killed during attempted robbery. Then you have here girl 15 missing. I don't know if we have any more of contemporary documents. Look at this. The puppet of the government, the Commissioner of Police, upsurge in brazen killings across TNT. He now saying this? For real? You really look at this? When you look at the amount of murders, the number of murders, these are the issues affecting Trinidadians and Tobagonians. And he now find time to make the statement, open warfare. Open warfare has been going on since 2015, coming up the road now till 2022. So these are the real issues. I don't know if we have any more, but I mean, this is really what it is. Acting Commissioner blames illegal firearms. I can't believe in 2022, after all the deaths, all the blood that has flown, all those mothers who weeping for their sons and their daughters, all those children who weeping for their parents, this is the statement that will come and be made. I mean, this really, it just smacks of incompetence. And so to continue, the media, to continue to be distracted is to perpetuate an injustice on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is where I want to say that members of the media have to be very careful. It is tantamount to oppressing the people, as we have seen with crime. We have to focus on this and the incompetence of Minister Hines and Prime Minister Rowley. You have a man who flying all over the place, unaccounted for most of the times, and he's the head of the National Security Council. And therefore, to perpetuate these things, it will give way to something that is tantamount to bad governance and an undemocratic government, which is what MP Indarsingh is saying. If you are going down the road of Maduro and others, Asaimi and others, all the more reason when these fellas have been indicted for drug trafficking charges that we need to know. You must have more transparency as to why it is you are dealing with them. But those are my 2 cents words that I wanted to add, MP Indarsingh, that I hope that people do not get distracted and wonder about things which really could be the equivalent of parroting what Dr. Rowley and his incompetent cabinet would want the population to be bombarded with in terms of print media and social media and media coverage.
Well, thank you very much, MP Rambally. If there are no further questions, we in the United National Congress will continue to dissect the issues affecting the people of Trinidad and Tobago in our Sunday morning press conferences. Of course, our weekly Monday night virtual meetings under the leadership of our political leader and the leader of the opposition, the Honorable Kamla Prasad Bisesa, and also sometimes we engage in midweek press conferences, and we will continue the battle in the parliament when the parliamentary term resumes. So we will continue our work within the parliament and outside of the parliamentary framework. Thank you very much and have a beautiful week.